Hello, everyone. My name is Damian V. I'm going to be your host today. And today we're going to be looking at part 4 of the chess tournament. So I'm with the white pieces and my opponent's with the black. So it is a standard opening e4, e5, followed by the King's Gambit. So I know the chess engine doesn't like the King's Gambit very much, but I had prepared a huge line for this and saying that it was only an intermediate tournament. I wasn't too worried that I was going to be facing, any master level players that knew how to perfectly refute it. So they actually accepted this time, which was nice. I was able to gain a strong center in the middle with d4. And they had played a funky move over here. Why is this funky? Because c3 simply gives me a tempo. I followed by capturing in the center, and as you notice, pawn control, pawn control, pawn control, pawn control, and bishop and knight control, as well as guarding a bunch in the center. So King's Gambit, if they accept it and don't know to play this move, is just absolutely killing at the intermediate level. So yeah, I know that chess engine usually doesn't like this, but I would encourage any beginner or intermediate player just to learn the basics of the King's Gambit, because if your opponent doesn't know how to refute it the proper way, you just kill with it. And it's not necessarily a tricky position that has any kind of tricks. White side isn't going to be checkmating the black king in like 3 moves or anything here, but it's just such an easy position to play. You have such easy development, 2 options for castling. It's just super simple to play. Opponent plays in the center, again gives me a time to play this, and surprisingly, for how much the engine is saying that I'm up, my opponent and I were playing like almost the exact engine evaluation moves. Like as you can see, he plays the engine evaluation move. I was playing like the exact setup for the King's Gambit and everything. So kudos for my opponent for actually knowing, or not knowing, but figuring out a lot of these moves, because they were perfect engine evaluations of each other. So here he plays this Queen E7 move, which, as you can see, double attack on the knight, and it's actually saying that I should short castle here, which is really interesting. But that's probably because queen here, followed by rook, forces the king to give up his own castling rights. But I don't know. Sometimes the engines just say very interesting things. I go ahead and block it, which again the engine doesn't like for some reason. He castles, which gives me the chance to attack on his side. And so now, as you can see, there are 2 ways that he can capture back, and he has to capture. This is, of course, with check. And he actually decides to capture away from the king, which is really strange to me, saying that I still have a dark square bishop, which is going to absolutely, give him hell, because the dark square bishop guards these 2 squares around the king, leaving him vulnerable to open file attacks. And I take the queen, he takes back. Again, this pawn's really funny placed. I now have castling rights. Standard development here, he's attacking the bishop. And so where do you want to play? I know you can all see the engine evaluation, but why? Why does the engine evaluation like this, right? And this is a concept that every beginner, I feel, should know. Like it's not usually stated, but this is just such a nice concept to be aware of. where can this knight move, right? Knights always move to opposite colors, right? So the knight's on a light square, he moves to dark squares. But what dark squares in particular? This one, these dark squares, right? And you'll notice they kind of make a ring, but it's not a ring, it's actually a square. The knight makes a square box, actually. And you'll notice this is all on one diagonal. I have a dark square bishop. So by placing the dark square bishop on d2, right, all of these squares that the knight can jump to are now watched by the bishop and the pawn, but all of them are watched by the bishop. Similarly, if this pawn right here wasn't there, right, I could put the bishop here and guard these two squares from the knight as well as these two squares by the knight. So putting any kind of bishop, let me get those out of the square, or out of the screen. Putting a bishop 3 squares away from a knight like this guards that knight's ability to move forward. And this is such a neat, just basic concept that will definitely improve your game. A knight gets placed, here. If you put a bishop here, it guards all of its advanced movements. So it's just a neat little way of just preventing this from doing anything. He moves to the open file, and I follow suit. I have this. He doesn't. He moves to attack the knight. Now, I could have played h3 here, and I decided to go king up, actually, because I wanted to keep this pawn chain going on. The engine probably liked the fact that bishop would take, because then I have the open file for my rook. However, I didn't have a lot of time. It's only 7-0 blitz, so taking too long to analyze some of these positions was not my ideal. I actually was planning on capturing with the king to preserve these pawns. Capture with the king and move them back, as this is always guarded by my bishop. And, later on you'll see the bishop was actually moving over to this square later on in the game. And keeping this pawn chain alive actually allows me to play the move g3 later on. So that actually becomes important later. He plays in the center, and always remember danger levels. I can force a check. I don't have to address this right away. Force a check takes. Now I can take, and he forgot to play this move before. As I said, bishop moves to guard or to attack h2. Now, because I didn't play h3 before, I now have this move, and it's guarded. He plays forward on his king side. Now I'm on the open file. This one's actually good for me, and you may be thinking, well, why would I give up, these squares with the bishop? Well, I'm not going to actually capture with the bishop. I'm going to capture with the knight. 2 reasons for this. One, I can move the king again. If this knight is out of the way, the king no longer has to be there to protect the knight. As well as, if I get my king here, he can come back to these really fun squares. And those are both perfect outposts to jump to, well, outposts, right? All of these squares are guarded by pawns. And so if I get this capture, I'm able to jump and get a great position with my knight. So of course he accepts, and I move my knight. Now I don't have to worry about protecting my king. King can move back, king can move over here if he wants to get out of danger. But even better, because I traded that rook out of the way, I now don't have to worry about my king being in this open space, because there is no rook here on e8 to attack it. So my king is pretty much safe from any kind of checkmate for a while. I just kind of forced it into an endgame where I'm up with a pawn. He pushes forward. I ignore this, saying that I can simply capture and protect it. This knight, again, why would I play this? If he plays here, I simply just ignore it. Simple as that. And now these all of these pawns are just kind of stuck in the corner. If he doesn't take, I can take, and so of course he takes, I take, simplifies the position down, and bishop back. I play up. I can play up now because the bishop, actually the reason I played up is because with the bishop here, it's actually trying to target the A2 square. And you always got to remember about all these x-ray attacks. Something that you got to look for is this knight moving out of the way, opening up this discovery on the A2 square. So of course, I go ahead and move to protect that A2 square, as well as threaten the knight, so the knight has to move. Now I can push my pawns further up. I exactly do that. Have a perfect pawn chain. Remember, always, if you don't have an easily sided move, to just improve your pawns. Just simple as that. Improve those pawns. As well as the bishop pair just absolutely destroying the center of the board right now. His bishops are a little less cut off. This one's cut off on one diagonal. This one's cut off for a couple squares here. Actually, more squares. Plays forward. I take, because of course I don't have anything blocking it. Takes with check, and I block. Again, do I want this? Yes, I do, because my king can now come in the game. I still have a square for my knight, an outpost. The knight's not going to be pushed anywhere because these pawns have no power. You know, they'll simply run into the knight. So of course he takes, and I take. My king is now in the center of the board. I have options. His king is not. His king is blocked. This is good for me. Again, he threatens check. Now, a lot of times you might ask, well, do I want this? Because bishops are definitely better in endgames. At least in this position they would be. And here if I take, I'm going to give up my bishop for his knight, and now I'm left with a knight. Not the best ideal in an endgame, but if you do look at the position, I have an outpost for the knight right here. Both of these are dark squares, and I can just simply play on the dark squares. So I went ahead and captured, and played up. Of course, he found the best move to attack this. Now, actually, the best move, as you can see by the engine for me, is to play on these dark squares, or simply to run this up the board. But I tried to save the position, I guess, and ended up losing a central pawn. I probably here should have played this and kept it simple. Used my knight to go berate the other pieces, but of course I played here. And I ended up letting the square get guarded. Now that's very important. Played in. He moves his king to the center, and I'm a little bit too slow here. Yep, and you just watch the eval bar drop. And the reason that just dropped from +6 to +1 is because now, well, in a couple moves, it's a stalemate. And so this position is in fact a stalemate. It's saying that there's still a slight chance for white, but there really isn't. He played a lot of the best moves. I did actually end up hanging this pawn, but he didn't see that, so of course I played up. He played the smartest move, attack this, because if I take, he takes, and it's going to be a stalemate. So I try and prevent his king from coming in here, but he takes anyway, and of course this is a stalemate. Why is this a stalemate? Because I can't run this way. It's too slow. Actually, sorry, the reason I can't run this way is because it's blocked. So if I take a step this way, his king simply blocks. If I try and go after this pawn, it's simply too slow. I have to move the king over all of these squares, move it out of the way, and then move this one all the way up. It's simply too slow. He's going to be pushing this one. And again, if I go over, he'll just block. So this one's a drawn-in game. by force. We play around a couple king moves. Even here, even this move back, it's still actually a drawn in game. And the reason is I just can't go here. He simply goes, and it's going to be an equal game, same tempo. Again, I can't play here to prevent his king from backing off. If I play up, he'll play down, and I'm starting to lose tempo going this way. If I play towards him, he just plays back. So actually, even this is giving up an extra square is still fine for him. So I push a pawn. He plays, and now there's just a race to the center, and as you can see, it's a drawn-in game. We both queen at the same time. And at this point, I was just pretty much looking for a repetition of moves, hoping that he would blunder somewhere, and was thinking about considering a draw, but he blundered. And yeah, don't always consider things lost, you know, when you're playing a human, because humans make human mistakes. And from here, every person on the face of the earth should know a queen versus king endgame, and black resigns. So I was playing a really good game, had a lot of theory involved. In fact, it was like pure theory for like the entire beginning of the game too. Like it was just ridiculous how long it was. We went theory for, like all the way up until here, even a couple moves in front, all the way up to castles. This was, you know, pure theory. Made my job really easy. But yeah, so that was game 4, and certainly an interesting one. But needless to say, don't ever give up hope. There's always a chance that, you know, you play a human and they make a mistake. So anyway, thanks for joining me, and stay tuned for part 5. Like and subscribe if you are interested. Thank you.